Hi, I'm Droolbatz. It's so nice to see you. Today I'm going to be reviewing the 2008 horror movie, The Eye. I'm going to be discussing it based on its premise, its production value and artistic choices, and finally, how it compares or contrasts to other films of the genre. I hope you enjoy. Sydney is a classically trained violinist and she's highly accomplished. She's also blind from playing with firecrackers when she was 5 years old. Sydney has been on the list to get a cornea transplant for a long time, and finally the day has come. When she finally is done with the healing and opens her eyes, she sees the doctor, she sees her sister, just as blurry shapes, but her eyes are working, yay. And she also sees someone in the corner. She goes, "Oh, is that a nurse?" And they say, "What? There's nobody there." As she starts recovering from the surgery and learning how to see properly again and like focus her eyes and things like that, she starts seeing more and more of these ghosts and these weird spectral figures, and they start to realize that she can see them. There is something wrong with the eyes she received. The Eye brought a lot of star power with famous actors and actresses including Chloe Grace Moretz and Jessica Alba, who played Sydney. The acting was really spectacular, the performances were nuanced and really matched the tone of the film. I was very impressed with that. I also really enjoyed the visual elements of this film. Watching these figures like float in and move past at various different depths and watching Jessica Alba's character like react to them was really impressive. The CGI of these special effects it wasn't noticeably CGI. Personally, I don't like things that are noticeably CGI, but it was CGI in like a very tactful and convincing way. And just like the shapes moving past was just very, very impressive, and it really, really helped to express and illustrate for us the experiences and emotions of Sydney. Where this movie kind of struggled with me was that while the visual elements were cool, they were fairly repetitive. Because Sydney is like learning to see and she has these new eyes, there's a lot of like up close shots of like her like looking around and trying to learn what she's seeing. There's the shots where like she sees the shapes moving and stuff. There were a lot of those and they started to get fairly repetitive. I mean, it was cool and like I was going along with it, but I feel like maybe if an actor or actress who was not as, beautiful as Jessica Alba and maybe not as nuanced, I think the whole up-close visuals of just the face would have gotten really tiresome a lot quicker. The music was fairly traditional. Because Sydney is like a classical violinist, there's a lot of really beautiful classical music playing too that I thought really added to the world building and the kind of subdued tone of this movie. It was kind of a slow burn movie. It's intentionally not a fast-paced movie, but the movie did struggle with some pacing. The movie's only, I think, 96 minutes long, but it felt close to 2 hours because it was so slow and quiet. And I think with some editing, they could have edited down some shots so that some shots wouldn't have been so long and drawn out, and there wouldn't have been quite as many repetitive elements, and the movie would have just felt a lot tighter. The writing was not super convincing at certain points. The actors were of quality, and I thought they definitely made up for that, but the writing was still a little questionable, and you have to suspend your disbelief in ways besides just that there are supernatural beings. For example, when they take the covers off of Sydney's eyes, they do it in an extremely well-lit room, and from what I understand, when you have any kind of surgery on your eyes, they want you to stay like in a darkly lit room and then gradually expose yourself to light. So I thought that was kind of weird that there's these harsh fluorescent lights and he just pulls her, eye bandages off. I guess it doesn't matter, but I just did notice that in the movie. So like little small elements regarding the science behind eyes made me kind of question what the writers were doing with all that. But altogether, the movie was ultimately of quality. This movie had some really impressive elements, but struggled a little bit as far as the editing and the story went. Now I'm going to be discussing how this film stands apart from or blends into other films of the genre. I am going to be spoiling this movie, so please take this as your cue to leave if you don't want any spoilers. To those who are sticking around, thank you so much. All right. Sydney has been going to this therapist because of all the weird shapes she's been seeing. She's been struggling to sleep. She keeps having dreams of an explosion. Her therapist is kind of dismissive of her at first, but eventually he tries to believe her, quits being so condescending, and he, even though it's illegal, he gets the records on her donor. They discover that she was a young woman living in Mexico, so they take a road trip down there to meet her family. They discover that the girl down there who was the donor had everyone in her little town knew that she had the sight. She could see people's deaths before they happened. She could see ghosts. A lot of people didn't like her because they thought it was really freaky that she'd sit there and cry in front of somebody's house because she was seeing them die like 20 years in the future, and don't really blame them. But anyway, she wasn't super well liked. She predicted that an explosion would happen in a factory where her mom was working, and she managed to get her mom out, but she was killed in the explosion. A lot of people are still, I guess, annoyed at her even though she died because just of that weirdness and that kind of weird interaction. While they're down there, Sydney encounters the ghost of her donor and basically, in like a heightened moment of suspense, says, "It's okay, it wasn't your fault, it's okay," and she's hugging her, and people come in and they just see her like hugging the air. It seems that she will suddenly be at peace now that she has comforted this ghost. As she and her therapist are leaving Mexico, they get stuck in a traffic jam, which is annoying. She suddenly starts seeing the images of an explosion again, and she's like, wait, didn't I just conclude this? And she starts seeing all the weird shapes, the weird spectral figures around her again. She realizes that she wasn't actually seeing her donor's death. She was seeing the future, and that there's going to be an explosion that'll kill so many people right here in this traffic jam. She manages to save a lot of people and gets them out of their cars in time, and then a large fuel truck, who is also stuck in the traffic jam, explodes, and in the process some glass goes into Sydney's eyes and she is blind again. She is able to go about her life as a musician, and she is at peace when she's not seeing all these ghosts anymore. So this movie had the great plot twist of she actually wasn't seeing the past, she was seeing the future. That's great. The problem with this movie is that it had the veneer of a false ending when she's comforting the ghost. And that just wasn't convincing to me. The way that a movie should work, if you're gonna have that kind of a plot twist, is that the ending, the first ending, the fake ending, needs to be really convincing. The problem with this fake ending in the beginning of the end was that it didn't really match with the story. Sydney had been seeing these ghosts and seeing the images and stuff, and she had actually, as things were getting worse and worse, kind of started to communicate with the donor a little bit, and was kind of like seeing images of the donor and stuff. So really, she could have, if all she needed to do was comfort her donor, she could have done that easily in the big city, I think it was New York, but I can't confirm, where she was. She didn't need to travel all the way down to Mexico. It almost felt to me like they forced her therapist and her to go on this road trip just so they could kind of suggestively imply that there might be a romance there. I will say this movie didn't push the romance, which I appreciated. The problem was just, you know, I'm comforting a ghost in Mexico. It was anticlimactic, and B, it really didn't make sense with the clues that had been leading up to that point. So I suspected that was not actually the end, and I'm glad it wasn't, because it would have been a bad ending if it was. It kind of, I guess, cheapened the surprise of the second ending because the first was so unconvincing. The whole, I thought I was seeing the past, but now I'm actually seeing the future thing has been done before, but not super often, and I genuinely like it. There are a couple of movies that I've seen that do that, including a Spanish horror movie called The House at the End of Time, one that's starring Isla Fisher. There's even like some kids shows. There was like an R.L. Stine kids show called The Haunting Hour, like an episode about the Black Mask or something, where they think they're seeing the past, but they're actually seeing the future. I think it's a great plot twist every time I see it. I don't see it that often. I think in The Eye, it was just not that good of an ending. Part of the problem, too, was that the scene was extremely drawn out overly so. It was one of the longest and least well edited scenes in the movie. And like I said, this movie had some pacing problems to begin with, but it just made the ending feel like a drag. It just didn't pack a punch. If I had to rate this movie, I would give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The production value was really high, the actors were really good, and I was really impressed by the exciting visuals. However, the movie did fall flat with the fake ending, and it was fairly repetitive, so even though it was a cool, atmospheric, somber movie, it started to get a little dull at various points. Altogether, though, it was a good movie. I think it would be a good movie for maybe people who are just getting into horror, or if you want something that's not super scary. It's very, it's a little scary, but it's like not so scary. It's more just about the experience of her being scared and kind of more the mystery of her trying to figure out why this is happening. People who are very seasoned horror fans and who like more bombastic things probably won't get a lot of satisfaction out of this movie. I'd love to hear your thoughts though. Have you seen this movie? What's your take on the past versus the future visions? Let me know any thoughts you have. I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that this review was helpful and enjoyable to you. Please like this video if you liked it, and please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I make horror movie reviews on this channel, and if you like that kind of thing, stick around. Okay, thank you so much. Bye.